Hello, everyone. I will give you a few more seconds, minutes. I see the attendees are starting to come into the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is really exciting. We're very excited about this session. I see more trickling in. Welcome, welcome. We have a great session for you today. All right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our session for today. Hello and welcome to this exciting third edition of the 2023 webinar series hosted by Sterling Martin Associates. My name is Jessica Kilman and I'm the Director of Client Services with Sterling Martin Associates. The title of today's session is In Search, Resume, Profile, and Brand. Just a few Zoom webinar housekeeping items. Your attendee cameras have been turned off and your audio is muted by default. The chat feature has also been disabled. However, at the top or the bottom of your screen, there is a button for Q&A. So please feel free to submit questions during the session. We do have an hour for this session and we will hopefully get to your questions. However, if we do not get to your question, we do have a final slide on this presentation that has all of our panels information via email. So please feel free to contact them via email with questions that we were unable to get to. Hopefully we'll get to them today, fingers crossed. So without further ado, I introduce you to Dan Borschke with Sterling Martin Associates.
Well, thank you, Jessica. And by the way, Jessica Kilman is our producer extraordinaire. Thank you for keeping us on track. My name is Dan Borschke, client partner for Sterling Martin Associates. I bring more years than I want to admit to this discussion today. I've been both on the executive director side, administrative side, as well as recruiter side for the last 5 years. A CAE, also a fellow, and I've run 4 trade associations, so I come to you with that experience. I am joined by 3 spectacular colleagues who will be presenting an enormous amount of information for you. Laura, Sharon, and Susan will be introducing themselves when they come up and present their information. So I think it's imperative that you know that they are truly experts at the conversation we have. And we're also thankful that you're joining us, because we're hoping to answer all of your questions. And if we don't, as Jessica said, please feel free to contact us. There are a few important glossary terms that we want to make sure that you're aware of before we get into today's discussion. I was hoping to get 10 C words, but as you can tell, it didn't work out. The first one is client. Even though we truly know that the candidate who is searching for a job is an important element of the process, the money is paid for, the search is financed by the client. And those are the people, when you have a search firm, who are paying the bills. Customization or customize. When you put together a cover letter or a resume, and our 3 individuals will be discussing this at length, use a template, obviously, but let's make sure you customize that document to answer all the questions and all the issues that are for that particular job. Also under customization, my philosophy has always been, make sure your resume is up to date on any given day, because you never know when you're going to need it. I hate to say it, but decisions are being made. You may be looking for a job earlier than you think. You may be offered a job earlier than you imagined. Make sure your resume is up to date whenever possible. Consistency. Please make sure that the dates you use on your resume are identical to the dates you use on your LinkedIn profile. I know that 3 individuals later will tell you, we have seen on occasion where they aren't consistent, they aren't exact, and it makes for a long discussion. Proofread. Don't just use the software, actually proofread. believe it or not, in my last association job, which was a national association with concessionaires, someone sent in a resume and referred to it should have been a bowl of popcorn, and it turned out to be a bowl of popcorn. Let's just leave it at that. And then ATS, or applicant tracking systems. For those of you who aren't aware, many organizations, many firms also use a software package to help them when they are receiving resumes. There is some opinion, and I know the three individuals will be addressing this as well. There is one opinion that I read recently on Ladder, which is a newsletter, that if in the position description, it says looking for someone with supreme customer service, they suggest you should use the term supreme, because that's what the ATS will be looking for. There are different opinions on that, and I know that Laura will address that. Also, please nix the trendy. If I hear the phrase servant leader or servant executive one more time, I'm going to pull out what's left of my hair. And by the way, change agent, that is so 2020. So we'll eliminate that as well. The cover letter, there are differences of opinion. You will hear that from the three individuals later on, but frankly, there's still an importance to have a cover letter. And then finally, the LinkedIn profile. Susan and Sharon will be addressing that. It is imperative that you have a up-to-date LinkedIn profile. Next slide, please. Here's the agenda for today. The basics for a successful resume, how to successfully brand yourself with your LinkedIn profile, what recruiters and search committees are looking for in a candidate's resume and LinkedIn profile, and then finally, how to prepare for a successful search and transition process. So before we take up too much more of your time, I'm going to turn it over to Laura. Laura, thank you so much for being with us, and we look forward to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Dan. First, I want to say hi to everyone. We have a nice big group. Thank you for showing up. I know you have lots of choices in your day, and we appreciate you joining us here at Sterling Martin, and I'm thrilled to be a panelist. Just a little bit about my background. Again, my name is Laura Lebovich. I run and own a company called the Career Strategy Group, been in business 17 years. We support job seekers at every level, from entry level to senior executive, in helping them land the job they love at a higher pay. And we've been doing writing resumes for 17 years, but I've been doing it for longer. I've certainly been looking at them for longer. Prior to my career as an entrepreneur, I worked at AOL for a while in HR. And before that, I worked at Walt Disney World, traveling the country, recruiting for the parks and resorts. And most interestingly, probably to the people on the call, I interviewed more than 10,000 people during my time at Disney. So I certainly have seen a lot of resumes. Sometimes we did panel interviews with 5 or 6 people. So I was interviewing 6 people at a time. So again, I've seen my share of resumes. So I hope that will help you understand how I'm informing the conversation, given my background. So the first thing I just want to share with you are some sort of resume best practices. Okay. And again, this is just from what I see working from the resumes that we create for our clients. For right now, we're telling everyone to include a title across the top of your resume, whether it is what you do or who you are or what you want to do. It's important to put a title at the top, one for the ATS, for the applicant tracking system, so it can pick it up. You can put a few little writings below, seeking, objective, very small, and then the title at the top, so that they know the job you're looking for. It helps recruiters. I hope that the executive recruiters here would agree. It makes it easier to know right away what it is that you're looking for and where to slate you. And also, I would hope you don't cram everything you've ever done onto one resume. Just like what Dan said, it's really important to customize. It's also important to really keep the audience that you're targeting in mind. Okay, if you are looking for a position doing X, but you've always done Y and you've had a little bit of experience doing X, you want to sort of blow up that X experience, right? So that it sort of fits more with the brand of who you want to be. It's just really important to think about what you've done and minimize the stuff that is not relevant, or minimize or remove the stuff that is totally irrelevant. We had someone recently who was a was a nutritionist and wanted to become a paralegal, had only taken 3 or 4 courses as a paralegal, but we really kind of went all out. What classes did they take? What portfolio did they create? And then we did include early work experience as a nutritionist, and maybe some of the skills that translate into being a paralegal, but definitely want to keep the audience in mind. Also recommend that you create, I call them a system safe resume. Some people don't know what an ATS is. ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. And an ATS, hopefully you all know, is what recruiters and companies use to parse through resumes. When they're getting a lot of them, 500, thousands, they help them to sort of parse the resumes and find the ones that are the most appropriate for the jobs. You definitely want to have a system safe resume or an ATS resume. They're usually a very simple, bland document. You can look for how you create a system safe resume online. What I'm talking about today is not going to be that resume. Okay. The resume I'm talking about today is the presentation style resume, the one that you hand to your colleagues, the one that you bring into the meeting with the executive recruiter. It's the wow resume. Okay. Even if it's nixing the trendy, even if it's not including, the colors and the graphics, it's going to be by nature prettier than an ATS resume. So leave the ATS resumes use them through the platform so we know that it goes through and that someone sees it, but also create a presentation style. And that is what I'm going to be talking about today. In the presentation style resume, it's okay to add a little color, to add a little fun, to be a little dynamic. We do it all the time, from a little bit to a lot of it. Some of our executive salespeople, we write graphs and charts and color and kind of go crazy. And then they go to recruiters and we hear that they're the most beautiful resume they've ever seen. But you also, again, have to be aware of the industry that you're targeting. If you're in tech, you're going to want to be more conservative with your layout. If you're a creative person, you're going to want to add a little more flair. If you're really creative, if you're a graphic designer, you're hopefully going to create it on your own, and it can also prove to be a portfolio piece for you. But you want to pay attention to the needs and the desires of the industry. So that will require you to ask around, right? Talk to people in tech, talk to people in manufacturing, talk to people in consumer products. What do those resumes look like, and what do they want to see? We're going to talk about this one a lot, writing strong accomplishment-focused bullets. I think this is, for me, the second most important thing about a really good resume. And the first important thing is also going to be discussed, and that's a career summary. The reason I love strong accomplishment bullets is that they tell a story, and that is the goal of a good resume, right? Is to tell your story as best as you can from beginning to end. So we'll talk about that. Don't neglect non-traditional work. Just because you haven't been paid for it doesn't mean you aren't skilled at it. So I really think that this might be a little bit of a controversy. Some people may not agree with this, but from my perspective, I do believe that experience is valuable and can go in another section, whether it's volunteer or community-based work. You can also create a big section of it. Let's say you're doing event planning for your church, or you're doing, something in your community. If you have a big role, put it on your resume. Those things that you've done, nurture them, cultivate them, and include them carefully, right? Cautiously. You don't want to put all volunteer experience, but the ones that really matter to your target audience. Incorporate keywords that mirror the job description. This is just what Dan said right before. I can't remember what the word was. Instead of, what was that, Dan? You said instead of something, use something.
It was supreme customer service.
Right. So usually you'd see on a resume superior customer service, right? And so if the job description says supreme, you better believe you should put supreme. That's just one more chance for your resume to get picked up by the ATS bots, by the robots. So pay attention to those keywords that are on your resume and try to pepper them throughout your resume if you can. Worry less about the length of your resume. I really want to impart the importance of this because people really stress about this. And in my experience, what is more important is to decide if you're going to do a 1-page or a 2-page and then commit. But if you are, don't do like 1 1/3 or 2 1/8. Commit to the 2 pages. What that means is if you're going to commit to a 2-page resume, you better have incredible content to fill all 2 pages, right? At the end of the day, content will dictate the length of your resume. If you have 3 years experience, you're probably going to be in a 1-page resume, but it's the chicken before the egg, right? In my chicken, but a lot of people say it has to be 1 page when you're an early careerist. The reason it's 1 page when you're an early careerist is because you only have 3 years of experience or 2 years of experience or, college. I disagree. I just wrote a college resume for someone that was 2 pages because he is super impressive. He's already been offered 3 jobs from Google since he was 13 years old, and he's coding in every language you can imagine. That person needs a 2-page resume. No one would ever get me to disagree with that, right? So I guess the bottom line is just have content for the full 2 pages if you go for the 2 pages, or 3 pages if you're a senior executive, and then commit to it. Don't do a quarter of a page. Stick with reverse chronological order as often as you possibly can. Recruiters, I would say it's probably 10, 15 years ago maybe 20 years ago when the functional resume came on board. Functional resume being you separate out what you did from when you did it so that it can hide some of the red flags, right? Maybe short-term stints at different jobs or jobs that are maybe a little more irrelevant to what you're looking for. But recruiters, and you can back me up here or maybe disagree, Sharon and Susan, but recruiters are onto it, right? Functional resumes are not our friend. And it's important now that recruiters they're asking, what did you do next? Tell me about your career chronology. Tell me how you got into the role you're in today. Like it's a story. So reverse chronological means most recent job first, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. I would say 99.9% of the time, I'm using a reverse chronological resume. The only exception to that, and it still is reverse chronological, is that I may also include a section at the top, which has like relevant, manufacturing highlights or relevant marketing highlights, if the most recent job experience does not include marketing, right? I'll put relevant marketing experience so that we can bring some of the stuff from the bottom up to the top without using the dates that you did those things, but it's still including it. And then you're going back and doing the reverse chronological.
Laura, we have a great question that came in. How far back in years should we include on our resume?
We just talked about this right before we hit play on this recording. I'm so happy someone asked this question. Okay, so I'm going to say that I said that this earlier is that if you are, 50 or 60 and you're trying to put 10 years on your resume, a lot of resume writers will say, don't use more than 10 years experience. I call BS. I don't think that's a good idea. I think you are trying to hide your age. Not that it's a bad idea, but really that is an extreme amount, right? People say just use 10 years. I usually suggest considering where the truly relevant experience that you have sort of ends, right? Where your experience is concerned. Let's say it's 15 and a half years back or 17 years back. Then the rest of the stuff really isn't that important to your overall goal. I might put that in an early work experience section and then remove the dates and just have a little bit of a snippet of each of the jobs. You don't want to, I don't remember who said it, Sharon or Susan, we're not trying to hide it. We just don't want to put it front and center that our age. And also I was telling people earlier, my experience at Disney, I was 23 years old when I had that experience. I'm currently 51, and I would have to go back more than 25 years to have that experience on my resume. That is never going to come off my resume. It's the most interesting thing about me. And it really is very relevant. It's a talking point for recruiters. So if you have something like my experience, super exciting back in the background, you're not going to want to take that off. So I think there's no one size fits all, but you want to be careful about, how you showcase your age without removing everything past 10 years. I hope that helps. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that, but it's just not a one size fits all answer.
Yeah, well, I just have to say, I really agree with that. That having a little summary about early experience, I think is really helpful because you don't have to have dates. You don't have to have a lot of detail or take up a lot of room on your resume, but it shows that you are an experienced person. And particularly if we're looking for an executive, a senior level person. We don't want someone with 10 years of experience. We want that 20, 30-year person. So it's a good thing.
Mhm. I love it. I love it. Um, I love to hear that from an executive recruiter. Honestly, it's great because it counters a lot of what my industry is saying. And sometimes my industry just is very tone deaf. They don't know, they don't always know. So thank you very much, Sharon.
No.
There is one thing that your resume must do. Overall, above everything else, is convey your story. Okay. You can do this in two ways, through the career summary and through the accomplishment bullets. Next slide, please. Okay. First and foremost with your career summary, and I'm going to give you some examples in a minute of what a career summary looks like. But a career summary is that top section. If you're an executive on the call, you'll know that in an executive brief, you have like maybe a 30-page report, and then you have that one page that explains the whole report, right? That's what we're doing for the resume. I also think of this as like the prime real estate. I use the analogy of pretend you're going into a Barnes and Noble. I spent almost the entire pandemic in Barnes and Noble. I probably read 10,000 back covers of books because my daughter is a reader. And it occurred to me when I was in the Barnes and Noble that if none of these books had a cover, we would be lost, right? How would we know? Is it a fiction book? Is it a cookbook? Is it a self-help book? What is it? We know if we're going to like the book by reading that, paragraph or two on the back of the book. And that is what we want you to do for a resume. It doesn't have to be exhaustive. It doesn't have to include everything, but we want to have an understanding of who you are. Usually this is written last because you can look over all of the things that you've done and then go, oh, okay, what are the threads that I've had in my career? If people come to me for something, what is that thing they're coming to me for? So it's a brief overview of your skills and experience in an effort to share the value you offer. Again, like I said, I'll show samples because I know this can sometimes be hard to understand by just hearing about it. Recruiters use the above the fold methodology a lot of times. I've been to a lot of career fairs and I will walk around the room and watch what recruiters are doing because it's important for my industry. And I'll see them take a piece of paper and they'll fold it in half and then they'll unfold it and they'll go here. Okay, here. That's the above the fold methodology. Some people that are in recruiting, most people will only look at a resume for a very short period of time. The time is debated, 8 to 10 seconds. But the important thing is I think most people will agree that we want to know what job you're targeting, right? We want to know what you're targeting. And so, like I said, a title, have really good stuff above the fold. Summarize what you do well all the time, every time. A career summary is a great opportunity to tell the recruiter why you're a great fit for that role. If you don't have it and you jump right into professional experience first, or just a very small, thing at the top, you are missing an opportunity to convey your story. A career summary can often include any and all of the following things: your professional title or target title, your key experience, industry specialization. Sometimes I put below sort of the header, I might put manufacturing, consumer products, retail, so that people know the industries that I'm focused on. You don't have to do that, but it can be a good use of your time, especially if you're targeting certain industries. It includes a branding statement. Sometimes a branding statement is sort of that cool, sort of hip thing they put across the top that explains who you are in a nutshell, right? They're sometimes hard to write, so you don't need one, but a lot of times people will use them. A key competency section is when you have maybe if you've seen these on resumes where it'll have something on the left side and it'll have lines on the right side about how much of the experience you have, or it'll have key competencies in a box where a text box where it says and usually they keep off software skills, but it might be like professional organizing, team building, whatever, those are the keywords. And a lot of that can be a placeholder for what is needed on in the job description if you can't find another place to fit it. If if you want a key competency section. Also, these sections can be off your resume if you have other places to put those key competencies that are in the job description. Okay.
So
next
a
slide,
question did come in, and it does pertain to leaving things off, would you recommend not placing actual dates on your educational preparation? I've heard that this is a good idea to prevent any potential concerns with age-based bias.
Again, I mean, I think it's also depends on the person and how, I would say probably if you're in your 50s or 60s, that's not a bad idea to keep it off. But I would also like to hear what the executive recruiters think of that, because they're looking at these resumes currently. Yeah, Susan?
I would say it's absolutely fine to keep it off, because I'm still looking at what you've accomplished. If you do take because it's against the law for anybody to ask you the year that you graduated from college, period. If you're going to take it off of your resume, then make sure that you take it off of your LinkedIn. And sometimes LinkedIn makes that difficult. You can go to the help function to figure out the magic steps that you have to take, particularly this week, because it does change that often. But I think it's fine. I absolutely think it's fine. That's my opinion. Sharon?
Yeah, I agree. And again, at the senior levels, we're more, I mean, we want to see that you graduated. Many clients require that, although I know that there is some change in that to try to be more equitable. But historically, especially for an executive level position, they wanted at least an undergrad degree, most likely an MBA. When that is not as important as when you had it, then it becomes more about your experience. So yes, if you want to leave off the date of your degree, that's fine.
Well, isn't it also true that if you think you can hide it, there's, we'll find it if we wanted to find it.
Yeah, we can usually
Yeah.
find it on LinkedIn. That's my point, is take it off if you're going to be consistent. Let's put it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, next slide, please. The other way that you can tell your story is with your accomplishment bullets. Okay, and again, I'll show you samples, but whenever possible, you want to include the following in each accomplishment bullet. Your challenge, what you were asked to do, what the goal was, what was going wrong before they needed you to fix it. The action, what actions you took, and what was the result? So how did it turn out? Did you save the company money, increase membership, drive performance? I think this is pretty common. Most people have heard you got to put results, quantifiable results on your resume. What you haven't heard is a lot of people either just do the action, what I did, or they just do the result. What I'm asking you to do is incorporate them into a story. Bottom line, I usually ask the client, how did you save the day, solve the problem, or serve the client? For example, this was a real before bullet and a real after bullet after interviewing the client that I got after asking about the entire story. The first one was created surveys with 80% response rate. Okay, what that doesn't give me is the context. Maybe they had surveys that were 90% response rate before, although that's unusual. Why was the survey important in the first place, right? Was the survey system broken before they came in to fix it? So we flushed out the bullet and introduced community-wide inclusion, belonging, pulse surveys. There we go. That was the context, needed to do that. That's the action. With 80% response rate, which is the result, establishing baseline to build inclusive culture and experiences. That was the challenge. So the challenge was, how do we build an inclusive culture? The action was, make a survey. Let's do a pulse survey. Let's do a belonging survey. Make sure how do people feel here in the organization? And then we got an 80% result. So as you can see, we transformed the bullet into just a sort of a very bland thing where you kind of don't know the whole story to the whole story. Next slide, please. Okay, hopefully you guys can read this. This is a career summary section. I just want to draw your attention to what this includes. Number one, right at the top is the title, Senior Operations Program Manager. These titles typically match what you would find online on Indeed or Monster as much as possible, okay? Below it, where you see expertise, I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm having some vision problems, and 2 pairs of glasses is a whole lot more fun than one. Expertise in solving complex problems, building high caliber teams, partnering cross-functionally to define scope, gain buy-in, and drive progress across concurrent multi-million-dollar projects. Professional Scrum Master. Okay, so that's what we call a branding statement. Okay, if you can find a way to summarize who you are entirely in one sentence, go for it. That's a branding statement. If you can't, then you're like probably 90% of the rest of us, and that's also okay. But it is something that's included on a lot of these career summaries. In addition, the point at which you see career hallmarked by to the word improvement, that's typically what's in a career summary, right? We're career hallmarked by results-driven project leadership, delivering digital forward solutions that elevate user experience and produce strong ROI. Nimble self-starter, with background intersecting systems administration, yada, yada. So that's just the paragraph of what we've done in our background, right? And then the three most important things that we do, like I said, every time, without fail, all the time. That is what people come to us for, and that's what we want to include on the career summary. Kind of like if you were in a room and you were a fly on the wall, what would people say about you? You know, what do they go to Dan for? What do they go to Sharon for? What do they go to Susan for? Oh, that's she's so good at that, right? That's what you want to put on the resume. Below that in blue, you'll see that's the key competency section. That's where, you know, if you really want the job and you are worried that the ATS is going to kick you out because you don't have exact experience that matches what you're looking for, then this is a way, it's a placeholder. I don't know what recruiters think of it, but this is what I use because it is a way to game the system a little bit, right? To get it, if you have this experience, it's okay to put it on there. So there's nothing wrong with that. But it is a way to game the system a bit because you are including these bullets so that you can get a little bit higher from the applicant tracking system so that the applicant tracking system will see you. And then at the bottom, we just have awards, right? That's in the career summary as well, because they could be a while ago. In this case, they weren't, but they could be a while ago. And we want to make sure that they're included because they're a big deal.
Yeah, can I weigh in on that, Laura? I got to tell you, so many people will be like, hey, I won the Nobel Peace Prize. If you dig in my resume on page 2, you'll see.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, man, put that on the first page, put it under my nose. Because again, you don't know if I'm going to get to that second page. No offense, folks, but that happens. And if it's something that's really important, put right up there. I want to see it. I want to see it at the top.
Exactly. I totally agree. And we just don't want to risk them missing it. Right? Because they will. A lot of recruiters don't even get to the second page, so we don't want them to miss it. So next slide, please. This is another different color layout for a career summary. I want to just point you to the important things here. Once again, building trust, strengthening loyalty, improving the bottom line. That is what the branding statement. Below it, from the driven to the experience and below, these are just, again, the three things that we do without fail every time. To the right, those are the key competencies: client and partner relations, customer and account success, account management, event coordination, administration, and reporting. What we did here was we also blended them, right? Instead of just saying administration, project administration, reporting, you know, we kind of blended them so we could get a little bit of space saving on this resume. But when I talk about a little bit of like color, there's a little bit of off topic right now, but this is what I'm talking about. Just a teensy bit of color, a little bit of flair. I would say almost no one would say that they were offended by the colors or the format used here. It's just attractive, right? It's very simple. So when I say, you know what, possibly add a little bit of color, this is what I would do. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what I want to address your attention to, the bullets, the bulleted accomplishments. Whether you like these bullets or whether you don't, this did work for our client. Okay, this got this person a job in a very short period of time. So I know that it works. Okay. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about resumes, but what I do want to say is what's important about this is the way in which they tell the story. We wrote this resume, so I'll just say the way in which we write the story so that the entire story is told. Okay. For example, the first one, increased online scores by 1.8% average in 12 months. That would be the results, right? Across all regional properties by working alongside managers. That's the action to identify and target specific areas for improvement. That's the action. Drove up customer service by 4%, rooms by 4.8%, and cleanliness by 0.2%. Also results. And here comes the challenge. Despite ongoing construction at the largest hostel. There we go. We included all three in the same bullet. Some of these bullets I wanted to show you don't have them. They do not have a full story. That is going to be possible because at times you will not have the full story either, right? You may be involved in like a research project that you're in the middle and you're not even close to the end and you don't know kind of how the end is going to be, so you don't have results, right? Or you may come in and do something and have a result and have an action, but you don't have a challenge because it kind of was going the same way before you got there and it was kind of okay and you're just sort of taking over, right? I use that example a lot when people are in a role due to maternity leave, right? Because they're just doing the same job that the person in there was doing. They're not changing anything. They're just trying to make it steady, right? Stay afloat. So that would be an example. Can you, next slide, please? Okay, this was another high level executive. This was actually a CHRO that we worked with. This is the bulleted accomplishment section once more. And I'm just going to show you, for example, the second one, advocated for greater diversity among meeting facilitators. Okay. This is actually the action. I mean, it kind of is a little hard to see here, but this is the action. To give minorities more opportunities to lead initiatives. This was the challenge, resulting in a broader variety of topics and meeting activities covering relevant gender and racial specific topics. That is the results. Okay, action, challenge, results. So they don't have to be in order. You don't have to say, I was challenged with X and I did this, and then I resulted in this, but you do want to tell the full story whenever possible. Okay. The second one, quickly transitioned econ community to virtual meetings via Zoom and Google Meet in response to stay-at-home orders issued in March. We all live this, right? So that was in response, that was the challenge. The action was quickly transitioned to, and then the result is positioning the organization as the first group in New York to adapt to the shutdowns. We all know what that means. We all know what we tried to go through that, varying degrees of success. But that includes also the challenge action result. And if you have any questions about this, I'm happy to answer them after, or if you want to email me, I'm happy to do that as well. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my last slide. I just want to show you what some popular but questionable advice you might hear when you are talking about resumes, or when you talk to a recruiter, or talk to, a resume writer, talk to a friend, right? You're going to hear a ton of questionable advice. I just want to parse out a little bit for you. You should only have a one-page resume as if it's empirical, always one page. I talked about that before. It's never empirical. Now, if anyone says the word should to you, you want to question it. If you hear the word always, you also want to question it, always. One-page resume is not the right thing for everybody. It's about content. Content dictates length. Start with an objective. I hope that none of you are doing this, but I always say it because it's so important. An objective is about who? It's about you. My objective is to seek a job that enables me to grow in my current field, blah, 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 please. No more. Objectives are about me, the job seeker. Career summaries are about them, the employer. Okay, we just showed you what a career summary is. The difference is it's about them. What do they want? What do they need in this role? Go back only 10 years. We also answered that question. Depends on your early experience, how well it matches with your target job. Make it fancy so it stands out. It might be a good idea. It might be. I write a lot of fancy resumes and I love it, but it's not always the right thing for your audience or your industry. And there is only one way to write a resume. I love all my resume writer friends who say, you should do this and you have to do this. It's just not true. I have a very close friend who is helping high schoolers get jobs. And you know what she's doing? She's taking a one-page handout, normal resume size, cutting it in half, creating this incredible copy that is targeted towards a job. She got someone hired at Chick-fil-A and some other places, which you might say is hard, easy, but it's not, because a lot of those jobs have hundreds of applicants too. And by doing it, she did the first person. I do this, I do that. I love your chicken fingers. It was very creative and very cool. And the recruiter was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So there is not one right way to write a resume. I've seen many non-traditional resumes break through and get attention. Just do your research. That's what I would say. And if you're comfortable with the risk, I say go for it. Okay. And use the expertise that we've shared here and that we'll continue to share on this call. But you know, there have been a lot of great stories in CNN and in Forbes and Fast Company about job seekers who've done cool things with their resume and with their job search. So, you know, as long as you've done your research, you understand your industry and you know the risk, then go for it. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm just going to share one last thing. Last slide, please. One of the coolest things I get to do in my job, helping people for 17 years, I've helped thousands and thousands of job seekers, is I do something called a 1-hour resume makeover. It is so fun. Doesn't matter what your resume looks like now, I can turn it into what it looks like here on this page. Okay. I do have to ask you a couple questions to make sure you're a candidate for it. If you're a high-level executive, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging. I would need a little bit more copy on your resume to turn it into something cool like this. But you're going to get 10% off of these on your call if you're interested in working with me. Just let me know that you were on the Sterling Martin call. Thank you guys all so much for being here.
Thank you, Laura. We
We
appreciate
do
it.
have a few questions that maybe all three of you can fill in. What if you are considering a few different titles? Is experienced association executive enough at the top with the other referenced info?
I'm going to personally say yes. I think that would be enough for me, especially if you are looking for, like, let's say you're looking for a huge association, you might be a director or a senior director. If you're looking for a small one, you might be executive director, you might be the head. So leaving that a little bit maybe ambiguous might be okay. I might be okay with that. What about the recruiters on the call?
I'll go first since I'm not on mute, Susan. I think that does work. It is broad, but it does share what level you're at and what you're looking for in terms of industry, that it's association. So yeah, I think that's perfectly
Yeah,
acceptable.
I agree. It's fine. It's good.
And I know that this has come up before, Sharon and Susan. Another question, is it ever okay to use a CV versus a resume? I have colleagues who use a CV over a resume.
I think CVs are too long unless you're applying for something that the CV experience and the publications are necessary. We've had some in some of our searches where we're placing people in learned societies to be the head CEO for the National Association of Smart People. I mean, then it is, but I got to tell you, it's still, you make people kind of log through. I think it's better to have a little bit of a link. Maybe you can put a link, to your publication, something else that makes it more digestible.
I agree. We've had one search where it was academic, and the search committee really wanted to see the CV and what they've published. That's also true in the scientific community, but for the most part, I think a resume is much more to the point and allows recruiters and the search committee or hiring manager to get to the meat of things quicker.
Thank you.
And Susan and Sharon, this past week, Fast Company, the magazine, had an article about resumes. Believe it or not, the author contended that resumes are dead and she doesn't ever want to see another one. She's a recruiter. Can you address that and then, of course, move forward in your conversation?
That was to grab attention. I think you need a resume. A resume is what gets you in the door, right? Either through an ATS or a recruiter with their eyes on the paper. You need to have something that will show that you have the qualifications and the qualities that they're looking for. It won't get you the job. Your interviewing skills get you the job, but if you don't get in the door, you can't interview. You need a resume.
I agree with you. No, I can't say enough about the importance, especially since most recruiting firms are doing the senior level jobs. And if you think about the pyramid of people and the CEO jobs, and then the majority of people are not looking at CEO jobs in this world. Those folks still have to go through a talent acquisition person in a large HR firm and an ATS. You need a resume.
Good. Thank you.
All right, Susan, take it away.
So hi, I'm Susan Scott. I'm a senior executive recruiter with Sterling Martin. I have about 15 years experience, and I have two different things. I have about 8 years experience at Development Resources Incorporated. I have 2 years with Sterling Martin as a recruiter, and then had about 5 years experience at a very large nonprofit in DC as talent acquisition. So I've seen it from both sides, and specialize in nonprofit and research and government relations. Sharon, take it away.
Okay, thank you. I'm also a senior executive recruiter with Sterling Martin Associates. I have spent the majority of my working career in talent acquisition. I'm fortunate that I found what I loved early on. So I have 30 years of experience as a recruiter, 20 of that in retained executive search. So I've worked across industries, biotech, med device, manufacturing service, and also across functions, the heads of HR, finance, operations. I've really worked in almost everything, which is one of the things that I love about it.
So we're starting in on this slide, I believe. Sharon, go ahead and then I'll follow you.
Okay. So when we talk about solid time in seat, I would like to differentiate early career people versus senior career people. When you're early in your career, often you're looking for what really speaks to you, and you might change roles more frequently. You might change industries more frequently. And for those early career or in the early career, that's fine as long as you find your place and then you show consistency from there. For example, if you're a 25-year person, if you spent the first 5 years figuring out what you wanted to do, that's not going to be a ding against you. What will be is if you change jobs every couple of years throughout your career. If you always have to change companies in order to get a promotion, that's also a little bit of a red flag. So once you settle into what you want to do, you want to show that you've had success in your roles, that you're willing to stay and solve whatever issues are going on instead of, hightailing it to the next job because things got too hard for you. And you also want to show promotionals, promotional opportunities within your current organization. Because if companies think enough of you to promote you, that says a lot about your ability to get things done. So I'm a big believer in having time in a role, but I'm very forgiving of that early career side of things. Um, so the resume features, I think that Laura did a great job about sharing that, and I really can't argue with anything that she said. So she's my go-to person on that side of things. The cover letter best practices, when we read them, I have found a real difference in the importance of them between the for-profit world and the nonprofit and association world. In the for-profit world, I would only read the cover letter if I really liked the resume. And then that information might help me to sell them to the hiring manager. But for-profit companies aren't really interested in why you want to work for them. They always feel like, well, we're the best at whatever it is we do. Of course they want to work here. So I don't know that that's as important in for-profit. I have found exactly the opposite in the association and nonprofit world. Hiring managers, search committees, they always ask, why is this person interested in our organization? And that's because they're mission driven. People are working there because they feel like they're making a difference in the world. They want to know that the people they're hiring resonate with that mission. So I've actually had people ask, well, why haven't they given a cover letter? And I would need to explain, well, I recruited them. They weren't looking for a job. And then I need to go back to that person and ask them to put together a cover letter. So it is that important in the nonprofit world. For the ATS side of things, we also talked about that, make sure that you have the right wording so that the system can pick up on you have the skill sets, you have the experience that they're looking for. For a lot of companies, especially not at the executive level, the ATS does most of the weeding through the pile of applicants. So you want to make sure that your resume speaks to what that role is. And then with reviewing the current org website and salary research, incredibly important. You want to do your research. You want to be able to talk about what it is about the organization that's impressive, what's speaking to you about that organization, and you get that from the website. You can also go on Glassdoor, which I recommend, see, what other people say about them. And, because the world has changed and recruiters can no longer ask you what your current salary is, which I actually think is great. You want to have a sense of what that role pays. So when they ask you what you're looking for, you can provide some information that relates to the role that you're staffing. So those are my comments. Susan, you
I'll
have.
do it quick because I'm aware of the time. I would think one of the things, I agree with what Laura has said about her resume design. I will say that one thing I really, it's important. If we're looking for an executive leadership person, I need to know what their budgets were, and I need to know how many people they managed, and I need to know whether or not that kind of experience got better as they got more experienced in their field. And sometimes people don't put numbers in. I absolutely think in that top half, I should see that you have managed, grew a team of 10 to 20 and grew a budget from 1 million to 3 million. Having those kinds of numbers means I don't have to dig, and I know that you're going to be qualified. If they say we need somebody with complex people management skills, not somebody who's going to walk into the job. I need somebody who can, really just hit the ground running. I also think if you're looking and you're applying for a job that's in another city and you live in the middle of some other place, it's nice to put something at the top of a resume that says willing to relocate. Because then you don't have that because there's often an issue when you're not an overworked recruiter, but you have to think about the recruiter's mind. Maybe they have 6 searches, maybe they have 15 if they're in talent acquisition. They've got to go through resumes quickly and they want to come up with the absolutely no, maybe, and absolutely yes pile. And so making it easier for us to put you in the absolutely yes pile or maybe pile is really helpful. Take away those questions. Do they have, are they willing to move? Do they have the management experience? Also, if you're a person that doesn't have management, put in there where, I worked on a team of 10. We want to know that you played well with others. Often in these interviews, they want to know your subjective skills of being able to engage and have interpersonal positive connections. How do you work with people is almost as important as whether or not you've grown an organization, because nobody wants to work for a mean manager either. And in terms of the ATS system question, the one thing I'll say is that it depends on the ATS, but they'll often ask you kick-out questions. So if it requires management, they may say, have you managed people? That's a kick-out question. If you don't have any management, I'm not sure how you get around that. One of the other kick-out questions can sometimes be, what kind of a salary do you need? And I will very, very seriously tell you that if you can put down negotiable, or you put down 0 and the situation or the thing won't, say that's an error. When you put down a number that's way too high, sometimes if you get a lot of applicants, you just go in the no pile. We've got somebody in there. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention is that ATS systems do help the recruiter or the talent acquisition person get a manageable number of resumes to go through. I think we can go on to the next slide on LinkedIn because I know we're almost out of time. LinkedIn, we do. So let's just say that I have 5 people apply for the National Association of Staff job. None of them are perfect. We got to go look for people. That's what a recruiter does. So we have subscriptions to LinkedIn Recruiter, which allows us to sort of go hunting for people, and you can put them into buckets of experience, subject matter knowledge, that kind of thing. So it is important to make your LinkedIn profile look good. There's some basic things. If you decide you're looking, I think the $35 a month subscription to premium is worth it. You can take all these classes that'll help you figure out how to make your LinkedIn profile look better or how to go through an interview with a recruiting company better. It's good information. I think you should have a professional and a good picture. You shouldn't be way in the back. It should look professional. It shouldn't be you at somebody's wedding. Honestly, take the time to get a good picture. The succinct about section is similar to what Laura was saying. I think you're cutting and pasting stuff so that you've got about 3 sentences there that tells the story. I talk about it as the elevator ride pitch. What can you say in an elevator going up that is I think when they get off that elevator, they're going to take you in there and they want to interview you. You're going to put in there stuff that's related to the jobs that you're applying to. I know this sounds stupid, but I would get your context to 500 plus. If you're somebody at an executive level job, or God help, if you're somebody who's in communications and Marcom and you don't have more than 500 connections on LinkedIn, that just tells me that you don't use that really good resource well to connect and learn about your career. Take the time to get your connections up and you would be surprised. The location pros and cons, when we look for somebody and we're doing that sort of Boolean search where I put in, executive director and association and Washington, D.C., or something like that. Sometimes people will put in their location, like I live in Arlington, Virginia. That's not necessarily going to get you into a search for Washington, D.C. So sometimes I tell people really worry about and make sure you decide which location you're going to put down to be broad. If you're a LinkedIn Premium member, you get to put a secret message in there that nobody else can see except for recruiters. It says, hey, I am looking. I'm willing to go to LA or New York or DC, but that's it. And again, it helps them know how to engage with you. There's a way to update your job skills on there, and then it shows up underneath your job. So if you have, VP of marketing and communications, and you had to put in a new, integrate some new amazing system for marketing, you can put that kind of note down there. So making sure that your skills are up to date and they're embedded where I need to see them, that helps. I would include reference quotes. So that means go through, how to do this with LinkedIn, but you go to somebody recent. If it was somebody who's 10 or 15 years ago, that might be a great reference, but I hate to say this, but often people are like, what have you done lately? Okay, you invented air 20 years ago. I'm glad you did that. But what have you done in the last 5 years? It's not fair, but it's true. So if you can get a reference that's from somebody in either a strong stakeholder that you worked with, if you don't want, to ask a former boss or something like that, that's really good. And have them talk about, we worked together on a complex project, and like Laura said, and we won in the end. We had 500 people show up versus 100, so that they will say kind of what you want them to say. I do think education do's and don'ts, I think you definitely want to put in there if you're actively taking classes. CAE takes a while, so you can put CAE and just say in progress, right? So people know that you're studying it. You don't have to put down your years when you graduated there at all. But I can't underscore that the LinkedIn profile improvement doesn't take that long. So it is something that I really think you should take the time. If you're starting to do a job search, just make a list of things that you have to make look good. And I'll go back to one other comment about the cover letters. The cover letter, that my pet peeve, like Laura said about I am looking for a job. My pet peeve on a cover letter is when someone says, I am applying for the executive director job at the, the VP of this. I'm like, I know that. I'm holding your resume, your letter. Better opening sentence is always, given my 10 years leading organizations on, hoarding disorders and my CAE, I think I'd be a great candidate to consider for the executive director of the National Association of Staff. Something that shows that you read the job description, you were actually applying for that job, not some generic cover letter. I hate generic cover letters. So anyway, I don't know if you've got anything else here, Sharon, or should we go to questions? I think we've probably run out of time for our next 2 slides, but Dan, take it over.
Well, thank you. We do have one question, Jessica, if you'd like to pose it.
Let's see here. What are the thoughts of asking above the targeted salary when the salary is listed, especially when you have an educational and experience background and it appears that the job is below market rate?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Good question.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying, why don't you, the two of you, discuss the whole salary negotiation status? I mean, it's certainly something that everyone should be aware of.
Yeah, it's almost a whole hour topic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not against the law in all states or cities for me to say, what do you currently make? I try not to do that because it deflates women's wages. But if we have a salary range, and let's just say you're in the state of Colorado, or we had to put a salary range on, and I'm thinking, what was it, Dan? 150 to 200.
Correct.
So let's say that is the published 150 to 200, and somebody really wants 225. When I talk to somebody at a beginning of a search and we kind of come up with that, they're a stretch candidate. I'm not going to necessarily present them, right, Dan, because you have to give a client someone they can afford. Now, if they've done, and you've looked for people for a month and a half and everybody is above by 25,000, yes, at that point, you go to the client, or Dan, Dan can talk about this more and say, looks like we might be a little bit under. But at the beginning of a search, I would highly encourage you to be flexible and say, I would like to have something higher, but I'm willing to stay in it for now. But as soon as you get information that says, it's not going to go above 2, you should do the right thing and bow out, because I have to say that search firms do not like it when people stay in and then they decide later, I guess I'm going to pull out. Just be straightforward and honest through the process. That's my opinion.
And,
Yeah.
And there are places where you could find the 990s of these associations. However, correct me if I'm wrong, we're finding recently that the 990s are not being posted very quickly.
No.
I mean, we're looking at 2018, 2019, at the very outskirts, 2020. So we really don't know what's happened the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, COVID's really made an impact on that, sharing that kind of information. And we know that there are clients that they do want great skilled people for not enough money. It's like that definitely happens. So if you're working with the recruiter, like Susan said, be very honest. This is what I'm really looking for. I'm willing to have the conversation, because a recruiter can help sell that experience. You may have a search committee or a hiring manager that says, no, it's absolutely got to be 200K max if that's it. And then, but we do try to present a range of people, and sometimes we do present somebody that's a little higher in comp than they had originally talked about that they could go, because look at what you can get for a little bit more money. Sometimes they're willing to go higher, sometimes they're not, but it's worth the conversation.
And, I know we're out of time, and I want to thank Laura and Susan and Sharon. Laura, do you have any last minute words of wisdom?
Oh my gosh, last minute. No, I can't say I have any last minute. I think that you have a great group of people here on this call. And if any of you are uncertain about anything that was said or really need specific personalized feedback about something on this call, definitely reach out to one of us. I'm certainly happy to have you all connect with me on LinkedIn. And if I can support you in any way, I'd be delighted to do so.
Susan or Sharon?
No, I don't have anything really unique to share, but thank you.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact anyone. Here are the email addresses, and we thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us for Sterling Martin Associates' next webinar on April 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The title of this session is DEI, Why It Should Remain at the Forefront for Association Executives. Thank you so much. And please remember, this session is eligible for 1 CAE credit hour.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
We're done?